Welcome to today's webinar. I'm Saima Ijaz, joining you from Nanaimo, British Columbia, located on the beautiful and traditional territory of Nanaimo First Nations. I have worked as a non-ABA behavior consultant for over 20 years and have developed a comprehensive stepwise curriculum guide apt for the children, youth, and adults on the spectrum. Today's topic which gets overshadowed by the constant care, worry, and needs of the child with the diagnosis. Please feel free to send your questions around this topic to the host in the chat anytime. We'll answer those at the end of the presentation. So these are a few of my personal favorite pictures of my two sons that I like to share. Qasim, the younger one, has severe autism and has inspired me to the path of continuous learning and growth. And Saad, whose help, courage, and perspective has kept me positive on this journey. He has helped me in so many of my initiatives and is helping me host these webinars as well. Being a mom of two boys, I'm prone to using the pronouns he, him, and his more often in my talks and presentations. Please rest assured that I do mean to address all children concerned. Here's a bit of an overview for you of the topics that I'll be covering today, like understanding the family dynamics in the aftermath of diagnosis, the ups and downs of emotions, what goes through the mind of the sibling of the diagnosed child during this time, the required understanding and acknowledgement by the parents, and the supports that can be found or created for the well-being of the siblings. I'll begin with a quote by Sally Phillips. Let the words sink in as I read it. The siblings of special needs children are quite special, absolutely accepting and totally loving. From birth, someone who's different mentally and has a different way of seeing the world. It's a wonderful trait. It's a trait I wish there was another way of getting, but there isn't. And it does involve a degree of not having it fantastically easy. Let's take a look at these wonderful traits of the SIBS. And it's true for the siblings of a child with any disability, physical or intellectual, and not just for autism. These children are well-adjusted, they are more tolerant and compassionate, they are problem solvers, they're more career-oriented, and they make great advocates for their siblings. So all in all, at any given age, these kids are far more mature and responsible than their peers and play an integral role in the lives of their brother or sister with a diagnosis. Now let's try to understand what the siblings have to go through to turn out to be such wonderful human beings. Many parents feel overwhelmed with sadness when their child is diagnosed with autism and go through the 4 stages of grief: shock, denial, anger, and hopelessness before arising optimism about learning how to manage the new situation happens, which is called acceptance. It can take a considerable amount of time to process grief, and for some, it can be more prolonged and can lead to depression. In the meantime, there's the daily task of managing the child who just got diagnosed, child who's more than a picky eater. He screams, cries, runs all over the place, hardly sleeps, and is difficult to calm down and teach. And in many cases has no sense of danger, requiring constant supervision. There's a need to find the right professionals and make appointments with the pressure of doing things fast to cash on the early learning years. So the life gets extremely busy. All this stress, confusion, and lack of resources can delay reaching the state of acceptance for moving forward. SIBS acceptance is always there, whether they are younger or older than the diagnosed child. They don't understand the impact of the diagnosis and they're not worried about the long-term effects yet. For them, he's the same brother or sister that they live with, knowing that she stays preoccupied and has a few quirks, requires more care, but that's who he has been always. They can sense a change in their parents, though, and their worried looks, which makes them cautious. They become more observant and start helping whenever they can and start looking out for the SIB more as well. As parents, bulk of the time is spent learning about the therapies, finding right kind of help available, figuring out finances, and just running from one task to another. These are mostly centered around the care of the diagnosed child or taking care of the services he would be needing. Parents develop a tunnel vision for their new role, which diverts their attention from the typical children. As the months turn into years, siblings can sense that they are not receiving the same amount of attention and care as their brother or sister and start feeling envious. They notice that their parents are way more lenient with their SIBs and can feel hurt by scolding about an innocent tease or a conflict. Sometimes they act out just to gain attention or can confront the surprised parents demanding fairness. But mostly they try to do their best and hide their own problems so as not to be of any cause of extra worry for the parents. SIBs are aware of their parents' hard life and want to share in their responsibility by helping them in and out of the home, wherever they can. They try to be an advocate and a protector of their brother or sister. They mostly do well academically and are very well behaved. However, they do miss not being noticed for their individuality and with time start feeling less important, less loved, and less listened to. This can affect their self-esteem, emotional well-being, social life, and academics. During the preteen and teen years, the main concerns and worries shared by these children are that they were treated as caregivers. They felt that constant pressure to be perfect. They felt embarrassed in their peers and other social connections because of their brother. They felt judged and teased by their peers, which led them into isolation. They felt guilt of not doing enough for their parents or the sibling, or sometimes having negative feelings for their siblings. Many of them wished that their parents had shared more information around diagnosis, therapies, prognosis, and plans, and asked them what their concerns were about the future, and also understood them when they had the negative feelings and reassured them. During late teens, siblings begin to understand the responsibility and impacts of the lifelong care of someone they love and go through some of the same emotions and fears that the parents had. That can affect their own plans, resulting in uncertainties in choosing a career line and maintaining social connections. Also, they worry about having a life partner who would understand their sibling, or about having kids of their own with special needs, or what will happen to the sibling after the parents pass away. They also tend to internalize these disturbing emotions that arise from all this confusion. According to a recent large analysis, majority of typical siblings of children with autism tend to struggle with peer connections and other social difficulties. They can have anxiety, depression that can go unnoticed, and they tend not to discuss it with anyone. As parents, as we accept the new role and responsibilities of our diagnosed child, we also need to accept that we are in for a long haul and pace ourselves accordingly. It's important to create some downtime for ourselves and some quality time for our typical children within our daily routine to enhance everyone's well-being, which in turn will directly affect our abilities and better outcome as a family. So we need to analyze our role and figure out where a change and change of thought and action is required. Like, how much assistance do we expect from our typical children? Like, do they have to walk back and forth to the school? Do we ask them to keep an eye on them during the recess? How much assistance do we require during the time they spend at home? All siblings have conflicts as part of growing up and don't always require parental intervention. But as parents of a child with a diagnosis, we get overprotective and try to intervene too often. Is that what's happening with you as well? Do we, if our typical child acts out of character and does one or two of the things that our diagnosed child does all the time, like throw away something or just tip something off the table, would we ignore or reprimand or talk to him in private and ask what's going on? Do we take out the time to explain what's been happening in the life? What are all these service providers doing? What does the diagnosis mean? Or just ask him what's bothering him? What are some of the questions he has? Are we still too overwhelmed ourselves and require some sort of a support system to help us out, not feel so overwhelmed all the time? And how do we redefine our role? That's done by making time and space where the SIBS would be able to share their thoughts and feelings freely. Feel comfortable enough to ask some tough questions, and for us to remember to provide non-judgmental listening and some honest answers. We can start by acknowledging and appreciating their efforts and share with them some age-appropriate information. Give them just some specific things to help out and not ask for, depend too much on their assistance over the day. And give them some undivided attention. The change in the routine takes time, and the reconnection with the child also is not going to happen overnight. But it begins at home with just 5 to 10 minutes a day. Ideally at an early age, however, begin whenever you can. For a young child, just a long hug or pulling on him onto your laps to go over a picture book or an app or anything else interesting that you could show him. Or join them in their play. Try different stuff each day to see the child's response and what he or she likes to do, and then build on that. Nurture their interaction with the diagnosed SIB, not by telling them what to do, but by catching them doing something awesome and complimenting on that, and admire the interaction. Share some of the stuff that you've been doing and the child has mastered that, and use them in the generalization of the skills. Make them feel proud of their brother or sister. Encourage him to help his SIB by to do stuff by showing him how to do it, by modeling and not actually doing it for him. Tell him that he's the best role model for his brother, and his brother always looks up to him. And he learns 5 times faster from you than he would from me. And please have some time, set aside some time on weekly basis, like 15 minutes. It doesn't have to be like an hour or something. But those 15 minutes will do wonders with minimal effort. Actually, I think that this routine helped me more than it might have helped my son, and I turned it into a daily activity. Select time of the day when you are least likely to be occupied and interrupted. For me, it was after putting my little one to bed. And then offer your child, your typical child, a choice. Like, would he like to read a book or go out for take a walk, maybe play something, or just turn off the TV and just talk about something that's on his mind. Acknowledge being busy most of the time and not able to do much fun stuff as you would like to. Ask if things are fine at school. Do kids sometimes say stuff that you don't like? Are you worried about your brother? Do you see someone teasing him or teasing you about him? Try to reassure him that it's going to be okay. You don't have to worry. We are here. We as parents are trying to figure it out. And you can help us with that if you feel like it. We can figure it out together. Gentle probing and listening. And letting him know that it's easy to feel what they feel. Appreciation and validation of their problems and emotions goes a long way in reconnecting with an older child who might have gone a bit quiet. Begin by praising your kiddo. Let her know that what her help means to you. Speak from your heart and let her feel your love. Even if you've seen her acting out of character, probe gently. Let her know that it's okay to feel sad, jealous, or angry. All siblings do that. And, it happens. I have had negative feelings at times for my siblings. It does not mean that you are selfish or that you don't love him enough. You know and do a lot more than kids your age. I see your love and care for him. Would you like to do something else? Are you interested in learning a new skill? Join a music class? Would you like to go for a sleepover or invite a friend for a sleepover? Like, what is it that you would like to do? We do need to have deeper conversations with late teenagers, or if a sibling is experiencing an array of stresses and feelings that can affect their emotional health. We can share information and our plans with the child about the diagnosis. And when the typical children understand their siblings' disability, it helps them understand the why questions that they are afraid to ask and helps them connect and build relationships. Admits that our primary focus shifted with the diagnosis without us being aware of it. I remember saying that under the circumstances, I tried to do my best, and I was sorry if he felt neglected. I missed the signs of stress and thought that he was doing fine. Parents need to be vigilant if SIBs are experiencing feelings of hopelessness, marked depressed or anxious moods for more days than not, isolation and withdrawal from peers, or a drop in grades or absence from school. Other warning signs are marked increase in irritability, insomnia, appetite changes, panic attacks, and any clear mood change that is a sharp contrast to the child's typical baseline mood and behavior. Do not delay reaching out to a family doctor. It might be just counseling that's required or a prescription or both, but it's easily treatable and it's not going to last that long. Counseling is probably the best way to start with. No two family situations or the siblings are the same. The first variable being the age of the child. That will depict how much information he's seeking. You can check with your doctor, therapist, but finding a good book, I think, is very helpful. Just see what's your child age. Is he a primary school goer, or a middle school or a secondary school, and a book that relates to that age group. Gender difference is huge. Girls are more social and share what's on their minds easily. They forgive, accept, and move on more readily than guys. Boys are great as well. They just socialize differently, and we all know that. They can be a bit of a tease sometimes as a way to create humor, or they act out of character and then go quiet. They're more prone to undiagnosed emotional health issues as they internalize the feelings and try to distance themselves when overwhelmed. Um, the next point about the level of intellectual disability, that is a hard one to comprehend, and that's why typical children, many times I've been asked about that from the parents, that they bring up the about fairness, that you are just not fair. So how to tackle that? We have to talk about equality and equity. Equality generally refers to equal opportunity and the same level of support for all segments of society. Equity goes a step further and refers offering varying levels of support depending upon the need to achieve greater fairness of outcomes. So this concept is easily understood when there's a physical disparity as shown in this picture, or if it's a physical disability, which is visible and the supports required make immediate sense. Children with autism have varying degree of processing and intellectual disability, which are invisible to the eye and difficult to comprehend. Many therapies require repetition, trials, and errors to figure out the path for learning, and the amount of care, time, and patience required depends upon the extent of the intellectual disability. Sharing this with a typical child will help him realize why so much time, attention, and care is given to the diagnosed SIB instead of any equal sharing of the time. And the biggest variable among SIBs is of those that have experienced aggression. It's a huge stressor for the whole family and is more prevalent with the severe autism, affecting 1/3 of the kids on the spectrum that stay nonverbal despite the early interventions. So first and foremost, we have to keep our typical children safe. They have, having their own rooms or a separate family room where they can go and spend time, play, watch TV, and instructions for them to step away if their brother is throwing things or hitting, kicking. You can talk to them before and try to have a talk with them after each incident. Get them some sort of a self-defense training like Taekwondo, which is in case the child comes on to him. So it's just for self-defense and not hitting back. You should make the special education teacher or is the school teacher or the counselor aware what's happening, and see if they can arrange a sibling group for other families going to the same school. In case your child is looking distracted or has gone quiet or is acting out of character, please contact your family doctor. Not all the siblings are open to sharing personal thoughts and feelings, despite the open channels of communications. In that case, nurture reading and documenting skills. For siblings of those on the spectrum, nonfiction books written by other siblings or fiction which features character like themselves and their brother and sisters can be especially meaningful. You can find books in the school library, local library, and especially if there's an autism society or autism book bank in your area. Sometimes there are books and CD-ROMs available in the hospitals and child development centers as well. Then you can check online books and see if you can find those on apps, what you can find on app and for Kindle. So there is, if you try to search, it's such a huge list will show up. So to check what you can find. When the kids go quiet, that's when it really worries me. Encourage them to get creative, finding ways to another different ways, like if they want to write down what's going on, if they want to join an art class or a musical instrument they want to play. There's a good resources which wasn't available when my kids were younger. It's My Booklet BC. A good friend of mine has actually designed it. She has a child with complex needs. So it was initially made for kids with a diagnosis and just sharing important, pertinent information, keeping it at one place, sharing it with whoever it's required. But I found that it works very well for the siblings as well. You can go to the website, which is mybookletbc.com. Make an account, it's free. There are guidelines throughout. You have to fill up the forms. I've just listed a few of those here, but I think there are 12 forms, and you can pick and choose which ones you want to fill. There are some descriptions and some leading questions to make it easy. And when you're satisfied, just put in some pictures. You can print it out or just use as a PDF. For the curious minds with many questions, direct the children to educational autism websites, blogs, articles, and encourage them to the ones that have events happening and the ones that encourage discussions and sharing. This is especially good for older siblings. But do tell them to find what works and not to get overwhelmed with the information. Sense of belonging is something that typical children typical siblings of the child with the diagnosis deal with a lot, and it has gone unnoticed. It's because they are so mature and compassionate and sensitive. They actually get teased and judged, and they get isolated from the peers. The questions that they have in their mind, if they come up and talk about it, they're thought as weird. So they do not have the same and as parents, we miss that part out completely because we're very focused on our diagnosed child. So there's online groups that siblings are forming now. Those are great for giving them the sense of belonging. There are online theme discussions, gaming activities, events and learning happening, and best of all, no parents. So just bring it up or search if something's available, or let your child know that this option's there if they would like to try it out. Regrouping and broadening of vision can happen as well. The autism spectrum is so wide that the high spectrum and the high functioning people on the spectrum are really seem distant from the low functioning one. Actually, the neurodivergent groups that are coming up, they are more compromised of high functioning autistics and ADHD, while the nonverbal autism seem to be grouping up more with the Down syndrome and deaf and mute kids. And I've heard that two adult siblings, when they were sharing their perspective, it was so heartening because one was telling, they heard what each one had to say, and the one who had a sister with some physical disability, she was saying that, yeah, I have to help her onto the chair and then take her to the washroom, but she understands what I talk about, and sometimes we have such deep discussions. While the other one, who was a sibling of a uh, brother on spectrum, she was like, he's good. I can appreciate that he can walk and he can do a lot of things that your brother can't, your sister can't seem to do. But my biggest thing is that it doesn't seem, whatever I say, it doesn't seem to matter to him. He's just in his own world. So how they were appreciating each other's difficulties, but also sort of looking at what their SIB can do. And another way that I saw them unite was looking at future, at what sort of services would be required, and just standing with their parents trying to figure that out. So SIB shops provide opportunities for brothers and sisters of children with special needs to obtain peer-to-peer support and education in an informal, fun setting. And they get a sense of belonging with peers who are understanding and gone through the similar circumstances. More and more SIB shops are opening up. Most of the child development centers have them. You can do a local search to see if you have a group nearby. Usually the support group has some sort of an adult facilitation, and it's encouraged if it would be a sibling of the person with the disability. But not every place has a SIB shop, and we definitely didn't have that opportunity when my kids were younger. So, and it was one of the easiest thing to create. That's what I found out. So a few things that you have to consider is the age groups, like just separate groups for the primary, for the middle, and for the secondary aged children. The agenda is that, that they should be fun involved, address the needs of siblings by allowing them to share, play, and learn from each other through age-appropriated fun activities. They love to talk about the good and not so good parts of having a SIB with special needs. There are good parts, and doing it with the peers who get it. That's the big thing about it. Explore how others, brothers and sisters, handle sticky situations sometimes faced by them. So facilitator, ideally a sibling, but if can't, it could be a parent, which was in my case, but it could be a teacher or a special ed teacher, a school counselor. SIB shop facilitation trainings are also available. So you can look into that as well if you would be interested in setting it up for your child. So as a facilitator, you just introduce yourself and explain what's your connection with the disability, if it's your sibling, your child. Just share something interesting or that made you really laugh about. You can just encourage others to share. It actually goes without effort as kids are bubbling with all the stuff that they want to share. You can, for the next week session, you can just tell them that you can think about something that made you cringe or made you feel helpless, but also think of something that, tickled your funny bone. And the games can be, you can even ask the children to bring in their favorite game and select one for each session, or take them out to the playground or bowling, like whatever as a group collectively you'd like to do. if you rather not do it at home, there are different places where you can go and ask for a room. It could be at school, at the library, if there's an autism center or a society, and they have a spot, child development center or association for community living. Once you tell them your idea, mostly they are very encouraging and happy to provide the spot for you. All parents hope that their sons and daughters will have a supportive companionship throughout their lives, from when one of them requires some degree of ongoing care throughout their life. In this time and age where families get spread out over the map, there's actually a higher incidence of siblings staying close by when one of them has a disability. I have many close by examples where SIBS have chosen careers that could be directly beneficial for their diagnosed brother or sister and have moved back to the hometown after completing education, which is so heartwarming. As parents, our best bet is by providing them with our emotional support, understanding, and guidance, and seek out professional help if required. So I'll end by going over the traits of SIBS as adults. They are more goal-oriented, they're empathetic, kind, and trustworthy. They appreciate their own good health and intelligence, and they're open to future planning and sharing responsibilities. Thank you for joining me today for this presentation. I'll have the recording of the webinar along with a couple of articles about the siblings of the diagnosed child posted on my website shortly. If you have any questions about this or any other webinar, please drop me an email. Thank you. So with that, Saad, do we have any questions that been sent your way?
We have a handful. We'll start with this one. You mentioned that the 15-minute routine with your son helped you more. Can you explain that?
Well, I think my son, a younger son, who, like I said, has severe autism and he's nonverbal. So days seem to be, spending around him, but he used to be very aloof and I wouldn't get much interaction from him. And at that time, now it is the late 90s that I'm talking about. So when I tried to, people didn't know that much about autism. So when I would talk to my friends or some family members, they wouldn't know what to say. And so slowly I was just mostly in my own bubble, just trying to go day by day. So when I started this routine with my elder son, Saad, the degree of interaction and warmth that I got it back, it just seemed to fill me up. So I guess that's what I meant, that I don't know how much it helped him. It definitely helped me. And that's where I started looking forward to doing it daily instead of, leaving it for the weekend.
I have another one here. I did go through a long period of sadness after the diagnosis, but I thought grief happens when you lose a child. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, it's a great question. Grief often relates to a physical loss, but it can also be due to a sense of loss. While the diagnosed child is still a part of our lives, we may feel that we have lost the child that we thought we had, or lost the vision of his independent future that we had expected. So this is before, the interventions are not there, we are not seeing any progress. And overall, the first few things we look at the website, it says, it's a lifelong, and the picture we get is pretty bleak. So yeah, that's why parents feel that huge sense of loss. I hope it explains.
Our next question. It's hard to have any conversation with my daughter as she usually replies in an angry tone, and then we end up having an argument. What do you suggest?
Uh, I wonder if it's been just sent in by a participant who's there. I'm wondering. I think this would be a teenager. Your daughter's a teenager. You can correct me if not. Uh, but I've remember seeing that. Do you remember that period, Saad?
Uh, yeah, I guess it was a period where a lot of stuff was changing and I was sort of real, kind of the magnitude of the diagnosis, I guess, and
Yeah,
the long-term effects and how the rest of my life would be forming.
yeah.
Uh, and there was a lot of uncertainty and pressure and just didn't know how to express it. And so I
And
shut down.
and you didn't want to talk to us. You were pretty much pushing us away or just wanted. So, or you seemed angry most of the time or sad. I was at a loss of how to reach you. What would you suggest? I would like to hear from you before I make my suggestions, which would be pretty much what I've talked about already.
I think it's tough. I would say probably small steps and trying to come at it with a lot of empathy and understanding. Instead of feeding into their frustrations, validate their frustrations. Um, and through that, they'll slowly, gradually open up a little bit more and more. But it's not a change that can happen overnight.
Yeah, definitely.
Counseling would also be really good. Give them an opportunity to have that emotional development because it might be uh, they may not have much of an opportunity to have that development in their family life or among their peers. So making sure that they have a chance to do that, to open up to someone, even if it's not with you, will be good in the long term.
Yeah. So, what do you think if it's instead of having a talk or aiming for a talk, just going out for an activity? Would you have opened up to that at that time if I suggested, I can you come with me? I have to go do some shopping or like do you think that's a better approach? Like not to just bring anything up, but just let's just go out for a walk, have our own headphones, listen to the music, um, something like that.
Every relationship and dynamic is different. It's hard to say which one activity would work.
Yeah.
I would say the best thing would be just to start small and find any common ground and work from there.
Okay. Thank you. Did
Our last question,
yeah.
we have, I feel almost angry when people tell me to take out time for myself and my typical kids. You mentioned that as well. Isn't it going to take time away from my diagnosed child who needs it the most?
Uh, you know what? I used to feel upset as well when it would be suggested to me. Uh, but I think I got into some serious health issues, and somewhere I read that if you don't take a time out for your wellness, you'll have to take it out for your illness. So the taking time out is not a huge amount of time. It's not going on vacation or a weekend off. It's like 15 minutes extra in the bathtub, or just you're going to your room and listening to the music, or anything that could help you breathe a little easy, meditation, yoga. And you'll have to try a few things to see what's going to work. And I always say that keep trying, have at least 5 or 6 things in your back pocket to refer to, and easy to do within home or a short distance, that you can go and do and come back a little bit recharged. So that's what I meant by taking time out. I hope that you're able to do some of it. If we are feeling calm, we actually our productivity gets better, our thinking and concentration gets better. So you make it up otherwise. So it's not a loss of time by any means. Okay.
That's it for questions on my end.
Okay. Any other questions that the participant would like to just ask? Like unmute yourself if you like to. Otherwise, we'll be calling it a session. And yeah, thank you for joining us today. Have a good night.